Welcome to the 10-Minute Car Sales Talk Podcast, where it's all about life in the car business. Telling you like it is, here's the man with the plan, Terry Cameron.
Welcome back to another episode of the 10-Minute Car Sales Talk Podcast. My name's Terry Cameron. Today I want to talk about how to do a proper TO. Now, I have to tell you, a long time ago, when I first got into the car business, it took me 6 months to find out what TO stood for. And the reason it took so long is I just did what my managers told me to do and didn't question it. And after a while, I was so embarrassed not to know the things that everybody else knew that I just never asked. But before we get started on this, I want to remind you to hop on over to Apple Podcasts, give me a review and a rating. Hit me up at my website, 10minutessalestalk.com. There's a place for you to send me an email there. You can find me on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. And please remember, if you think it's worth it, share this podcast with your friends. So let's get started. I want to talk about how to do a proper TO. But before we do that, let me tell you how not to do a TO. And what I mean by that is that flying TO that you get all the time that kind of sounds like this. Hey, boss, you want to say something to my folks before they leave? Well, that's not a TO. And put yourself in your manager's position. How would you feel if you already know the customer has been released and all you're going to do is go out there and shake their hand and tell them thanks for stopping by? You know, there's not a whole lot of emotion in that, and it's probably not setting your manager up mentally to go out there and do a good job. Put the shoe on the other foot. What if you were told, hey, you have a customer out there on the lot. They already told me that they just got out of a bankruptcy and they repoed 2 of their cars and they're currently past due on their mortgage. What kind of mood, what kind of attitude are you going to take when you go out there to greet that customer? So we don't want to do the goodbye TO. Now, unless that's the only thing that you can do, if you're just trying to save the customer, in lieu of throwing a rope around their ankles, you want to grab the manager and let them know, hey, they're leaving. You want to talk to them before they go? I can't stop them. That's one reason, probably the only, you would do a TO like that. Now, let me tell you how important TOs are. Within a month of being in the car business, and I'm not sure if I told you this before, but I was hired by the dealer himself. He was a friend of mine. And I let a couple customers walk without touching desk and TOing them to my sales manager. And I remember this so clearly. My sales manager walked out into my office with a little box and said, this is a drag-out box. And I asked him what exactly a drag-out box was. He goes, this is what you're going to do where you're going to put all of your personal belongings into. The next time you let a customer leave without TOing to me, you take your shit, get off my lot, and don't come back. Well, I could have taken that a couple different ways. I could have got really pissed off at him and said, screw you, and left. But I didn't. I looked at it like, wow, this must be really important to them. Maybe I need to pay attention. Rarely did that ever happen to me again. So, guys, a TO is there to help you. It stands for turnover. Now, if your manager is busy, you may not be able to. But who's to say you can't TO to your finance manager, business manager, or maybe a senior salesperson? They're there to help you also. And if you have to split it, so what? Half of something's better than a whole nothing. So the first thing you got to do is to ensure a proper TO is get your manager involved early in the process. The earlier the better. And managers, you need to make some effort to put yourself into the picture early in the process. That means just keeping your head up from the computer screen, watching what's going on outside, and go out there and introduce yourself to the customer before they have any chance to have any kind of objections or anything like that. You're taking control, and it's just going to help out in the long run. Now, there's a couple TOs that you need to do. You need to know how to do a TO to your sales manager if the customer is having questions and you can answer them. Now, you do not want to wait until this gets hairy and your customers are getting upset and they demand to talk to the manager. You want to do this when you think that you're probably at the end of trying to close your customer in a calm and professional manner. And sales managers, you just need to learn how to look for that deer in the headlights look. As soon as you see your salesperson stumbling and having a problem with their customer, you need to jump in there. And remember, if you met them early, it's going to be so much easier to jump in now. There's also a TO to your finance department. And I hear this time in and time out about the bitching and complaining about how long it takes to get them into the box. And then once we get them into the box, how long it takes them to complete all their paperwork in there before, so you can go grab another customer. Well, if you set your customer up right, that finance TO, that turning them over to the finance manager goes so much smoother. The first thing you want to do, and I'm sure your finance managers, they come out of their office, introduce themselves to your customers, and they go over a few of the things that they're going to discuss when they get into the finance office with them. As soon as they're done, then you've got to go ahead and set the expectations on how long it's going to take before you get to go inside and see them, and what's going to happen in the meantime. What you should be doing at that time, of course, is going over the car that they're purchasing. And if it's in make-ready, find a like model and go over some of the features and benefits that's going to be important to them and part of the delivery. You can also grab the owner's manuals and the service schedules and go over all of that with them while they're waiting. All it does is reset the clock and takes care of some stuff that you're not going to have to do later. It's also a really good time to introduce them to your service manager and service advisors. The last thing you want to do is complain about how long your managers take, your finance managers take in there. You want to just keep on edifying them, because we need them closed when they go in there, because finance is one of the most profitable parts of the dealership, and whether you get paid on it or not, the dealership survives on it. So it's really important that you turn them to finance properly and professionally. Turning TO into your sales manager really is simple. And sales managers, you're probably not going to like what I have to say right here, but salespeople, if all else fails, just walk your customer right up to the sales manager and introduce them. Now, here's where things get a little bit out of whack here. Everybody seems to think that the purpose for the sales manager, the TO to the sales manager, is for the sales manager to go out there and close the customer. Well, that is absolutely not true. If it were true, and if it is true at your dealership, no wonder your manager doesn't want to go out and TO all the customers. You're going to fail most of the times. And who wants to go out there and do that? The main reason your manager is going to go out there and TO a customer is not to close them. It's to get them to the next step. And it may be it, just getting them to the next step. But if they do get them to the next step, they might have an opportunity to move them one step further. Regardless if they buy or not, chances are they're going to go to another dealership. And if they get a manager TO at all, it's not going to be as good as the one they just got at your dealership. They didn't get that far with them because the manager didn't go out there with the mindset of just moving them one step at a time. I know this for a fact, though. The earlier you get a manager involved, and if you TO that manager before they leave, not the, hey, do you want to say goodbye to them before they leave, TO, but hey, Mr. Manager, I think I'm about at the end of what I can do with this customer. I need your help. If you employ that, you're going to have a much higher closing ratio. It's almost impossible not to sell more cars with manager intervention in the beginning and TOing them in the middle and at the end of the sales process. Now, when I talk about at the end of the sales process, managers, if you're not congratulating your customers before they drive off, shame on you. This is the most important part of the process because that's what they're going to remember. So TOing is not necessarily hard, but it's not tossing a hand grenade to somebody. It's introducing them and letting them pick up right where you left off. Whether it's the finance manager, the sales manager, the general sales manager, or maybe a senior salesperson. Get somebody else involved. I think you've heard the phrase, 2 heads are better than 1. And sometimes, even after 30 years in the business, a 6 or 7 month salesperson says something to me or jogs my memory and helps me do better. I learn from them, or I remember some of the things I forgot. It always works in our benefit. Always works to our benefit whenever we TO to the sales manager or one of the other managers before the customer leaves and while they are still in the negotiating phase. Don't be afraid to go out there and TO on Mr. and Mrs. Sales Manager. All you're going to do is try to move them to the next step. And salespeople, please do not let your customers leave without turning them to a manager. It's costing you, your managers, and the dealership money. Remember, the object of this game is to put you in a position where you have the opportunity, the chance to win more than lose. So use this. I suggest you go back and you listen to this podcast several times and then picture some of your TOs and how they went and how they should have went according to this podcast, this episode. I'm learning more just as I'm speaking. So again, guys, remember, the sky's the limit. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Please rate it on iTunes and visit the 10MinuteSalesTalk.com website to send an email. We appreciate your valuable feedback and don't forget to share the show with a friend.